Welcome everyone to CoasterGuy23 review number 11. Today's review will be on a coaster that I feel has picked up a lot of steam recently, even though it's a little bit older. Do I agree with all these people who are putting this ride insanely high in their rankings? Well, stay tuned to find out what I think of Maverick at Cedar Point. Maverick is an Intamin multi-launch roller coaster that opened at Cedar Point in 2007. It uses Intamin's signature 3-pipe track that it used throughout the early 2000s, along with Intamin's rocket coaster trains, which they used on a lot of their coasters in the late 2000s, such as Pantherian. These are also the same trains that were found on King Ka, although Maverick features the soft over-the-shoulder restraints rather than the hard plastic ones that King Ka had. Maverick was also Intamin's first Blitz coaster, which is really a roller coaster that has multiple launches. I don't know why Blitz coaster is such a special name. On the surface, Maverick may not seem like much, having a height of only 105 feet, a speed of only 70 miles per hour, and a track length just shy of 4,500 feet. However, Maverick is a roller coaster that changed the trajectory of the coaster industry forever. Prior to Maverick's installation, both Intamin and Cedar Point were focused solely on building record-breaking roller coasters, specifically the height record. Cedar Point was coming off the heels of Top Thrill Dragster, the world's first strata coaster, built by Intamin, and Intamin had just built King Ka in 2005 as well, so both parties involved were used to the record-breaking lifestyle. In fact, prior to going with Intamin, Cedar Point nearly made Maverick a record-breaking B&M floorless coaster, where it would eclipse 200 feet and break the North American inversions record. Obviously that never happened, and Cedar Point went with Intamin, and we got the Maverick that we know today. And man, what a great choice that was in hindsight, as Maverick was a smash hit from the day it opened, and it still holds up pretty well compared to the thrill machines of today. People will often bring up the coaster wars, where everybody tried to outdo each other and break the height and speed records year after year after year. And Maverick really did end those coaster wars. It showed both parks and manufacturers that height and speed are not the most important things when building a great roller coaster that will draw in the crowds. Rather, Maverick focused on having a very complete layout, filled with airtime, whippy moments, a second launch, and just overall having a full package. And I would argue to this day that manufacturers and parks much prefer a full package experience than breaking the height and speed record. Hence why the height and speed record has been broken for 20 years until Falcon's Flight opened. So yeah, Maverick symbolizes a lot of things in the coaster industries. The end of the coaster wars, the beginning of the modern Intamin multi-launch coaster, and overall just change how people perceive roller coasters from a review and criticism standpoint. Now let's jump into Maverick's elements. Maverick features 13 total elements, featuring 5 airtime moments, 2 inversions, and 6 maneuvers. The 5 airtime moments include the first drop, 2 bunny hills, a little shimmy, and a trimmed hill. Its 2 inversions are 2 0G rolls, and funny enough, Maverick has more maneuvers than airtime moments and inversions, with 6 maneuvers, including 2 stangle dives, 2 snaps, a brake hop, and the second launch in the middle of the ride. So overall, a very well-balanced element profile with a weird emphasis on maneuvers. And like I have said previously, it is rare these days to have a roller coaster that is very maneuver-heavy like this. Not to give away too many spoilers this early, but those 6 maneuvers that Maverick has, it really makes all 6 of those count. Maverick is honestly Exhibit A as to why I account for maneuvers in a ride's final score, because it shows that maneuvers can seriously contribute to the overall fun factor of a ride. Those 13 elements are taken in a span of about 62 seconds, and that's from when you take off on the launch lift hill to when you hit the brakes. That first lift hill is basically a launch, and I think it does contribute to the fun factor of a ride, so I am going to allow it to count under Maverick's prime ride time here. Now, taking a look at the force chart here, as always, I encourage you to flip back to see exactly where elements lie on this force chart. The first thing that stands out to me is Maverick really only has 3 legit airtime moments. However, all 3 of those airtime moments clear the negative 1G mark, which is pretty impressive. So even though Maverick's airtime moments may be few and far between compared to some other roller coasters I've reviewed, the 3 airtime moments it does have are going to be very memorable. We'll get to their exact airtime scores a little bit later, but they are going to score very high and rank as some of my top airtime moments I've ever experienced. However, only 3 real airtime moments isn't much no matter how strong they are. Another thing you'll notice is that Maverick actually has some pretty decent positives, hitting 4 Gs multiple times, albeit not in super sustained moments. To me, Maverick's positives have that beautiful balance of you feel the intensity of the ride as you whip around, but it's also not so intense that it's not re-rideable. We'll get to it in the POV, but for example, the turn out of the launch and the turn following a trimmed hill are just a perfect level of intensity for me, where you're feeling the positive G-forces, but in a re-rideable manner. So those are some things that stand out to me. Now let's jump into the POV review. Maverick starts off with one of its first of many very unique features, this being an LSM launched lift hill. Basically, it's a lift hill that is not steep at all, and you actually use an LSM launch to propel yourself up it. It slows down at the top so you don't get absolutely whomped over the beyond vertical drop that's about to come, but it's still a very unique feature and definitely better than a traditional lift hill in my opinion. Following the launch lift hill, we have the only beyond vertical drop at Cedar Point, a 95-degree drop of about 100 feet. This is probably about the best drop you could ever make with a height of only 105 feet. It's absolutely incredible. Yes, it's very road dependent, If you sit in the front row on this thing, you're probably getting a half G pop of airtime that lasts like less than a second, but this file I have was taken in the back row. So that's why it hits over -1 G of airtime and has an airtime score of -48.19. This is a great first drop, any way you slice it, and coming off that launch lift with a little bit more speed just exacerbates that angle even more. This drop definitely stands out at Cedar Point as it's really not like any other drop they have in the park, but I honestly just prefer some of the others. Like Steel Vengeance's I think is better, maybe even Millennium Force. This one is just over so soon and you're into that right hand turn before you even know it. The pop of airtime is so good though. It's funny because I'm saying that this might not be a top 3 drop at Cedar Point. I mean, it's pretty close to Millennium. They're just so different that it's hard to compare the two. But when compared to all other roller coasters, this is probably still a top 10 burst drop. That womp of airtime and the steep angle is just so powerful. And there's nothing really else like it in the world. Then, after the first drop, we go into this series of 2 snaps. These quote-unquote snaps are just quick direction changes in banking. So you'll be turning hard to the right, then turning hard to the left, then turning hard to the right again. And it just is these quick little choppy transitions. Now, don't get me wrong. These are fun, and these are above average maneuvers. But overall, snaps just kind of don't really do anything for me. I don't really see where the fun or excitement comes from. I just think after a first drop like you just had, this is just boring. I mean, literally, you go down the first drop and then Intamin said, okay, what if we turned really hard to the right, and then really hard to the left, and then really hard to the right before we actually started to really do something with this layout. The only thing that these really accomplish is whip. The turns aren't even super forceful on the force chart. Like I said, these are fun and I enjoy them, but there's just so many better options out there, especially for your first couple elements that happen after a first drop, rather than just doing these repeated banked turns that accomplish nothing. Our next element is a very strong ejector bunny hill. This bunny hill delivers some crazy ejector airtime no matter what row you sit in. In the back row on this file, it scored a 59.29. You're just going to get over 1 G of airtime on this hill every single time. There's nothing ever wrong with a straight ahead airtime hill, especially coming off some elements that weren't straight airtime hills. Sometimes you gotta just not overcomplicate it, and that worked out beautifully here. Coming off those 2 transitions that focus more on whip and fluidity, doing a nice really solid pop of airtime that's straightforward is a great fit here in this layout. No complaints at all with this element selection, and like I said, this airtime hill delivers every single time. Maverick and its next door neighbor, Steel Vengeance, are frequently debated as being the top ride at Cedar Point, so naturally I'll be comparing the two a little bit in this video, although I'll try to avoid it as much as possible. This Maverick Bunny Hill does hit a higher negative G value than any point on Steel Vengeance, but Steel Vengeance's top hat and outer bank turn are held for so much longer than this one. So that's why those 2 airtime moments I think are ultimately better than this one. Airtime score measurements will back me up on this as well. Following that hill, we have the first part of what the park calls a horseshoe roll, which is really just 2 back-to-back 0G rolls that are taken in the opposite direction and separated by a left-hand turn, forming a horseshoe shape, go figure. When looking at Maverick's layout as a whole, the horseshoe roll to me is definitely a weak point. It feels like a quick decline in pacing from the quick transitions and the rapid bunny hill that we took earlier. It's just a bit bizarre to have these 2 very fluid, drawn-out inversions in the middle of a layout that's full of quick transitions and force pops. I don't want to be too harsh on this element because I am glad that Maverick does incorporate inversions somewhere because it really gives it that variety and that modern Intamin multi-launch feel where you have maneuvers, inversions, and airtime all kind of equally balanced. But I just think the inversions here could have been done better. Like rather than these 2 drawn out 0G rolls, maybe you change one of them into airtime hill and incorporate an inversion in the second half of the ride. If you're familiar with Maverick, you do know that there was an inversion planned for the second half of the ride. But if you're not familiar with Maverick, don't worry, we will talk about that. But like I said here, inversions are definitely a weak point of Maverick for me. But the 2 inversions it does have are just painfully average. Again, Steel Vengeance, Maverick's next door neighbor and frequent debate opponent, is not known for its inversions, but its inversions are still better than Maverick's, in my opinion. In all my reviews, I always mention some part of the layout that I would change to make the ride for the better. And for Maverick, the horseshoe roll is the first place I would look. I'd probably keep one of the 0G rolls because, like I said, they are fun, but I think I would get rid of the second one in favor of another airtime moment, specifically something that has banked airtime, like a wave turn or an outer bank or something along those lines. Following the horseshoe roll, we enter this tunnel, where GP me on my first ride in 2017 genuinely thought the ride was over. However, the ride is in fact far from over, as once you come to complete stop, you slowly start moving forward again until an LSM accelerates you down this dark tunnel into a hard, sharp left-hand turn. Now, I know I sometimes tend to hyperbolize things on this channel, calling everything the best of this, the best of that, whatever. But I've thought long and hard, and I really just can't find an LSM launch that I prefer to this one. Running through my list of LSM launches I have here, I've got Velocicoaster, Top Thrill 2, Pantheon, Copperhead Strike, TMNT Shell Raiser, Flash Vertical Velocity at Great Adventure. I just don't think I prefer any of those to this one. Now, I think the darkness does create a false perception of how fast you're accelerating, because I don't really think it's that much more acceleration than what other LSMs have, but hey, The effect works if that's what they were going for. I think my top LSM launches would include this one, Velocicoaster's second launch, and both the backwards launch on Top Thrill 2 and the final forward launch on Top Thrill 2. I think those are clear-cut above every other LSM launch I've done. A coaster I'm curious to try to see how its LSM launches compare to my top ones is Stardust Racers, because those look pretty good too. But I haven't ridden that yet, so I digress. So what I love about this launch is that it deceptively makes you feel like you're accelerating way faster than you actually are, and the left-hand turn following the end of this launch is one of the greatest, if not the greatest moment of snap I've ever experienced on a roller coaster. It is just so good for reasons that I sometimes can't even explain. You accelerate down this launch track and you see the left-hand turn and it's just waiting, 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 and all of a sudden, snap, boom, and a strong crunch of G-forces sends you flying out into the light. This is my underrated element of Maverick that nobody ever seems to talk about. And again, it's another unique feature that this coaster has that you really can't find anywhere else. I mean, where else can you find a launch down a dark tunnel that sends you into a hard left-hand turn flying out of it? Well, my favorite element of Maverick is still forthcoming. I cannot underestimate how much this element rocks. I implore you to not let this little snap at the end of this launch get lost in the sauce of the other elements of this ride. Following this launch, we turn out into immediately an airtime hill that trims your speed down significantly. Now, listen, I get it. It was a practical decision. You wanted to hit the 70 miles per hour mark, but you didn't want to add more track or expand the plot of the coaster, so you just decided to trim down the speed following the launch. I get it, but that doesn't mean that this part of the ride isn't still a little bit of a buzzkill. Luckily, I wouldn't say that this trim actually kills the pacing of the back half of the ride, because it's still very good. It's just this actual element itself, again, is just not accomplishing anything. It technically does have airtime, scoring a minuscule 1.21, but it's just a wasted opportunity to add more excitement to the layout. Maybe this is just a me thing because some people like to appreciate the artsiness of roller coasters, but for me, an element should always have a purpose. Airtime, whip, fun transition, upside down, something. This element's only purpose is to reduce your speed. That is it. From the time you exit the launch, go over this trimmed hill, and then kind of start making the right-hand turn, this element takes up a full 5 seconds of ride time. And again, that is only to reduce your speed. I don't know what design-wise I would have changed here to eliminate this. Maybe there's no solution. But I'm still going to hit the ride a little bit here, just because, again, it's just a wasted time and a wasted element that doesn't add anything for me. The speed reduction is annoying, because, man, if there was no trims here, imagine how elite the rest of this second half would be. But it bothers me more that this is just a wasted space as an element on the coaster. The rest of the ride still has elite pacing despite this trim break. Then after that trim hill, we kind of finish out this right-hand turn here before we do this little shimmy kind of through the rocks here. Now, a lot of you may already know this, but the reason this shimmy is a little bit straight tracky and a little bit off-putting is because it was not originally meant to be a shimmy at all. In fact, this is where the second half of the ride was supposed to have its inversion, and it was going to be a heartline roll that would have taken place through the same rock structure. Now, don't exaggerate when I say this, but I think having a heartline roll here instead of this shimmy would be an absolutely huge upgrade, and it alone would move Maverick up a few places in my rankings. We would have given the second half of the ride an inversion, which I think it really could use one, and possibly could have given Maverick a world-class inversion that it also really could have used to help make up for the 2 0G rolls prior that are just kind of average. It is a dang shame because Maverick would be vastly improved with it, but unfortunately, that heartline roll probably will never make its return, barring something super surprising. With that being said, though, I think this shimmy is a decent attempt given the circumstances, being that they basically have to make a whole new element based on the track profile to replace the heartline roll. While it does feel a little out of place, I never would have guessed that it was not originally meant to be an element on this ride. Like, it fits in well enough, and it does give a very, very, very small pop of airtime, scoring less than 1 point on the airtime score. The rock work is a nice touch too, and it kind of adds a little near-miss element. The heartline roll thing really is just so disappointing though, because if that were here instead of this, that would raise Maverick to a whole new echelon for me. If there's any right in this world, Cedar Point will consider bringing it back. Following those 2 pretty mid elements, Maverick starts cooking again with its first stangle dive. Now this is truly one of the elite maneuvers out there. I just love how you rise up, quick snap, quick bang to the right, and then continue on your path. This element has a hang time and whip combination that you really can't find anywhere else. It kind of snaps you up, and then all of a sudden you're kind of hanging off to the side, and then it snaps you back out. It's definitely a weird sensation to describe. You kind of gotta just try it for yourself. But it's absolutely one of Maverick's elite elements, and yet another unique one on this very unique coaster. Now, if you thought that stangle dive was good, let me introduce you to the second stangle dive right here. The first stangle dive is already a very good maneuver, but this one puts that one to shame. This is one of the best maneuvers on any roller coaster anywhere, maybe the best. The hang time and whip combination is just absolutely insane. It is nearly a full inversion with how steep that banking is. You guys know that I love strong airtime, and Maverick has 2 really strong moments with the first drop and the bunny hill. And I really like that LSM launch in the tunnel, but this is my favorite element on the ride. It is simply fantastic. I cannot emphasize enough how rare it is for me to like a maneuver the main thing on the ride. I mean, you guys saw how hard I was on the snaps earlier for being boring, but this element is exciting, it's unique, it contorts your body in a weird way, and it is just so much fun. It's really everything I'm looking for in a maneuver. and it's Exhibit A as to why I factor in maneuvers when I'm ranking a roller coaster. They genuinely can be exciting and enhance a ride. And then finally, Maverick sends us out with one more pop of airtime, and a very strong pop at that, scoring a 36.37. This is again another straight ahead bunny hill. This one a lot shallower than the first one, but it still has pretty much the same effect in terms of overall airtime. Again, I'll echo that there's nothing wrong with doing a straight ahead airtime hill, especially when you're coming off a couple more twisty, turny maneuvers. As long as it delivers, of course, and this one certainly does, hitting a -1G of negative airtime. And then finally, we turn right and glide it to the brakes, ending our 62-second, 13-element long experience on Maverick. Taking a look back at Maverick's airtime moments, it had 5 of them, but only 3 of them are super noteworthy. However, all 3 of those score at least a 35, so Maverick's typical airtime hill is going to be very, very strong. However, these airtime pops aren't quite in that upper echelon as some of the sustained ejector moments we've talked about on this channel, such as El Toro's Camelbacks or Steel Vengeance's first 2 hills. These 3 moments hit a pretty similar negative G value, but they're just not held for nearly as long. Across 5 airtime moments, but really only 3 airtime moments, it scores a total airtime score of 145.27, which is pretty good. But it only has 3.88 seconds of airtime, which is not very good. What really saves Maverick's airtime experience is that the 3 bunny hills that really need to deliver do in a big way. Now, jumping into Maverick's summary, first up we have theming. And as far as I know, Maverick does not have a theme. And I've ridden Maverick over 20 times, and if I've never picked up on it, then the average guest certainly won't. So for theming, I'm going a little bit above bottom of the barrel because the story with Steel Vengeance and the 3 outlaws kinda at least gives it something. Up next we have presentation, and to start, Maverick's appearance on the midway and the way the ride is designed, from the queue line to the rock work, the overall appearance of Maverick is very pleasing. For loose article policy, Maverick goes with the good old-fashioned bins on the platform, no metal detectors or anything like that, so while that can slow down operations a little bit, they at least aren't enforcing any crazy policies on the riders. Then we have operations, and for how small the trains are and how naturally limiting the capacity is on this ride, the Maverick crew does a very good job. There's almost always 6 trains on the track, and the load times are always at the minimum interval. When I went in July of this year, the operations were impeccable, and trains would frequently cross over at the first drop and the first stangle dive. Maverick's line, however, does get very long very consistently, and I think that's in part due to the naturally low capacity and the fact that this ride's fast lane is absolutely broken. It takes you right up to the station, and they'll almost always clear the fast lane line before they take anybody from the standby, making the standby wait for Maverick absolutely miserable on busy days. So in my opinion, they gotta fix that. But otherwise, Maverick does a lot of things presentation very well. So I'm going to score Maverick right about here, about at 7.5 out of 10 for presentation. Up next we have laterals, and laterals is an interesting one for me with Maverick, because you definitely do get laterals on a lot of those maneuvers and side-to-side snaps, but it's not necessarily a sustained moment of laterals. It's more of a whippy moment of laterals. So the laterals are not sustained. Maverick does give you them pretty often, with the snaps and the stangle dive especially. So for laterals, I'm going to score it right perfectly in the middle. Up next we have positives, and Maverick does have a couple moments of strong positives that are not super duper sustained. The pull out of the launch, the pull out of the first drop, the turns between the snaps. A lot of Maverick's turns just do have some pretty good force to them compared to some other rides I reviewed on this channel. So for positives, Maverick is going to get well above average. Next up we have propulsion, and for Maverick it has the LSM lift hill, which I love, and the LSM tunnel launch midway through the ride, which I love even more, ending in that super sharp left-hand turn that I'll talk about in a minute. The launch lift hill is super fun and unique, and that second launch is one of the best launches I've ever experienced, period. So for Maverick's propulsion, I'm going to go significantly above average, a solid 9 out of 10. Up next, we have trains, and I am overall very lukewarm on the Intamin rocket coaster trains. They definitely feel a little bit dated to me. The obvious drawback that a lot of people mention is the over-the-shoulder restraints, which is a con, and I would rather have lap bars if it were up to me. But on a ride like this, it really doesn't bother me that much. I'm just happy that they have the soft, cushiony over-the-shoulder straps instead of the hard plastic over-the-shoulder straps like King Ka had. The soft shoulder straps are just more comfortable on your shoulders, especially during airtime moments. My biggest issue with these rocket coaster trains, though, is that they seat you super upright. The backs of the seats are super flat, and it kind of holds your body upright in a weird position. And my butt always starts to hurt when I return to the station when I've been sitting in them for too long. There's a reason Intamin retired these trains in favor of their modern multi-launch ones like they have on Pantheon and Velocicoaster. Those are way better in every category. The trains do track very well, though, considering their age, especially for a ride with intense forces like Maverick. So for Maverick's trains, I feel like I am very justified to score them as mid. Next up, we have maneuvers, and as I'd said multiple times during the POV, Maverick has some absolutely awesome maneuvers. Those stangle dives are some of the best out there. The snaps are also fun, but could have been spiced up a little bit. I wish Intamin showed as much creativity with the snaps as they did with the stangle dives. The left-hand turn following the second launch is also an outstanding maneuver, so that and the 2 stangle dives alone are enough to score Maverick almost a near perfect maneuver score for me. They really are all that good. Up next we have variety, and I feel like a lot of people give Maverick a lot of credit for variety, but I'm here to tone it down a notch. Maverick really only consists of 5 different elements: the beyond vertical first drop, bunny hills, snaps, distangle dives, and 0G rolls. And I guess you want to count launches too, that's 6 elements. Those elements are different enough from each other that variety is still going to score very well, but I am going to tone it back here and give Maverick a 7.5 out of 10 on variety. I think they could have mixed in a few more different elements here, like Intamin does on all their modern multi-launch coasters. Steel Vengeance, which often gets called very repetitive, at least does airtime in a lot of different ways, with some laterals, outer bank, wave turns, in structure, out of structure. So all Maverick does probably do variety better than Steel Vengeance. It's not by as much as some people make it out to be. Up next we have inversions, and Maverick only has 2 inversions, and they are both painfully average. It's just these small, graceful little 0G rolls that are taken back to back. So for Maverick's inversions, I'm going to give it average, maybe even slightly below, because again, I really think that third Heartline roll would send this inversion score up a lot. It really just needs a third inversion. I don't know what else to say. Up next we have density, and overall Maverick is pretty dense. The main docking points for density for me here is really that trimmed hill into that shimmy before the first stangle dive. It really doesn't feel like there's a whole lot going on there for me. It's just very drawn out, and it just feels a little bit more low event than the rest of the ride. So that's going to be where the density loses points here for me. The rest of the layout, though, Maverick does very well at avoiding drawn-out transitions and uneventful moments, and it keeps the elements coming in rapid succession. Up next, we have pacing, and a ride like Maverick shows very well why I like to differentiate between pacing and density. Because even though after that second launch and into that trimmed hill following that right-hand turn, even though there's not much in the way of elements going on there, the speed you keep through it is still very good. Like when you're traveling through that shimmy through the rockwork, you still feel a really good sense of speed as you hurtle toward that first stangle dive. Overall, both of Maverick's halves are especially well paced. You go into the horseshoe roll towards the end of the first half with good speed, then you fly into the brake run on the second half with that good speed. And for every element, it feels like you hit it with a good sense of speed, so you can really feel that element's forces to the max. Maverick is an elite paced ride, and the best paced ride at Cedar Point, meaning that pacing is basically perfect. Up next, we have smoothness, and for a ride that was built in 07, this is about as good as it gets. An absolute worst case scenario, if you get like an empty train, which doesn't happen very often, you're going to feel a bit of what I would call a vibration, which I would consider just a very, very small rattle that is noticeable, but in no way is really hindering the ride. This ride isn't gloss smooth like an RMC iBox or Siren's Curse that I reviewed, but it's about as good as it gets for a coaster in 07. But I grade all my coasters on the same scale no matter how old they are. So for smoothness, Maverick going to be near perfect, but a little bit of points off because there are some small imperfections in the track and trains as you traverse the layout. Up next we have duration, and Maverick takes 13 elements in 62 seconds of ride time, which is overall very good. Anything that approaches near a minute, I consider to have a very good duration. The 13 elements trends more towards average, but when you factor in that the second launch takes a while to boot up, 13 elements in this layout is perfectly fine for me. It's really the near minute duration that's going to give Maverick a very good duration score for me. Maverick feels adequately long, especially with the two halves that can kind of feel like their own 30-second ride sometimes. So for Maverick's duration, going a solid 8.5 out of 10 here. Moving on, we have airtime strength, and like I've been saying the whole video, Maverick really only has 3 airtime moments that actually hit, but they hit hard, hitting high negative G values, and while it's not very sustained, well, this category is called airtime strength for a reason. We're about that strong negative G value, and Maverick accomplishes that on 3 major airtime moments. I don't think some of these Maverick airtime moments hold up quite as well compared to some more sustained ejector stuff, like Steel Vengeance's Outer Bank, El Toro's Camelbacks, or some of those really, really strong airtime moments. The negative G value that Maverick hits on those speaks for itself. And I'm really not going to dock Maverick too much for the shimmy and trimmed hill, because those really aren't meant to deliver airtime anyway. So for Maverick's airtime strength, it is elite. Then finally, we have airtime quantity, and Maverick only has 5 airtime moments and less than 4 seconds of airtime, but it does have a total airtime score of over 145, so when you look at the upward momentum of its airtime moments, Maverick actually has quite a lot of airtime, if that's how you view to look at it. And in the grand scheme of things, 5 airtime moments, well, again, quote-unquote, 3 airtime moments, is more than a lot of other roller coasters have. So for Maverick, maybe this is a little bit generous, but I still think slightly above average, considering how much quote-unquote airtime that the 3 moments that I've been talking about actually have. Overall, Maverick is an elite roller coaster with the focus on maneuvers, those amazing launches, the first drop, and having a couple really, really strong airtime pops. However, I do just find some portions of the ride to be a bit blander than others. Like those snaps, like I said, aren't my favorite thing in the world, and the first section after the second launch is just kind of okay. I'm also more of a guy who prefers quick element spam and quick element pops, whereas Maverick sometimes tries to paint a full picture with each of its elements, and that comes with varying levels of success. Maverick has been a frequenter of the Captain Coaster Top 20. It hasn't left there since I started tracking the Captain Coaster rankings back in 2024, and right now it's at 17th of 2010 coasters in the database. It goes to show that Maverick has a lot of fans out there who think that is one of the world-class coasters out there. For me personally, Maverick comes in at my number 12 spot right now of my 223 credits. So I'm a bit lower on Maverick than what seems to be the general consensus right now. I've seen this coaster skyrocket into people's top fives, it feels like, relatively recently, and I just can't get there myself at all, to be honest. I just think all the coasters that I have above Maverick attempt to do so much more with their layouts, especially in the airtime categories that are of utmost importance to me. I've been considering sliding Maverick a little bit higher in my rankings, but not by a significant amount at all. My taste in coasters is just more based around airtime and throwing as much elements at me as possible, and that's not really Maverick's style. That being said, I really just struggled to wrap my head around how people prefer this thing to Steel Vengeance. Maverick has a stangle dives and the launch in the middle of the ride, but other than that, Steve has the better inversions, it has more elements, it's longer, it has a better first drop in my opinion, it's smoother, elements come at you quicker, and the overall airtime experience obviously favors Steel Vengeance, and it's not even close. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents on a debate I'm seeing going around online right now. And I know I've built up a bad tendency of bashing on rides right at the end, but just a reminder, Maverick is my 12th overall roller coaster, just beating out Siren's Curse and TT2 for my second favorite at Cedar Point. And those three, along with Steel Vengeance and Millennium Force, form a top 5 at Cedar Point that will decimate any other park's top 5 that dare stand against it. That'll conclude this review on Maverick at Cedar Point. If you want to learn more about my roller coaster experiences, such as my full ranking of all my credits, park visits and trip reports, ride counts, force charts, and more, find me on the sites listed in front of you. A link to each will be in the description. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.